Hey there, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. I know that the last few streams I've done have really not worked out well, and I appreciate everybody's patience as I move towards what I'm hoping is a much more reliable platform and a way for me to do better streams that are more informative and to keep doing them fairly often. Oh, let me mute that. I have to go. This is the kind of thing that comes up, you know. So let me pull up my mix here and make sure that that is off. All right, sorry about that. So today what we're going to be focusing on is this question of how to put together complicated percussion maps for Dorico instruments, and I'm looking particularly here at rototoms. I want to give a shout out to Shubas, who's been supporting and watching the channel for a long time, and posted a question related to this. And I thought, well, you know, that's a really interesting problem. I had that issue myself some time ago, working with taiko drums, where I wanted to have a set of taikos. There's large and small, just like with rototoms. There's large and small, and generally you have a player, and the player is playing multiple drums. So I wanted something in my score that looks like a single instrument, and I'm interacting with it creatively as if it were a single instrument. But of course, it is actually multiple instruments. So the first thing we're going to talk about is kits versus instruments. And I'm going to show you how I set that up in Dorico. That just takes a few minutes. It's very easy. The next thing is note heads, because note heads with percussion are really important insofar as they are how Dorico sort of allows us to notate the different hits, right? So you can think about it in these terms. When you're working with a violin, we have notation that we can do that tells whether or not to play staccato or spiccato or legato. These are all different sort of notations, and we have conventions for conveying that to the players. In percussion, one of the ways that that is conveyed is via note heads. Now, I'm not going to get in this lesson deep into any note head conventions. I'm not really an expert in that area, so I don't feel qualified to do that. But you're going to see how setting up note heads makes it very easy for you to navigate the different sounds and patches in your drum kit and make sure that everything's triggering correctly. All right, thank you, Rich. Thank you so much for coming back. I know the other day was a mess, and I'm glad to hear that it sounds good and everything looks good. So we're going to talk about note heads. Then we're also going to talk about percussion maps, right? So the kit is where we kind of organize our instruments so that it and how it presents on our page, like as a 5-line staff, for example. The note heads are where we're going to determine what are the available articulations for that kit or that piece of kit. But then percussion maps, that's where we link them up so that if we hit a rim shot, how do we make sure that it's actually triggering a rim shot, right? So that's the percussion maps element. And then finally, I'm just going to mention at the end of the video about this C3, C4 issues that I had when I was preparing for this. This has to do with the fact that software like Dorico or Cubase or Logic or anything like that, they treat middle C as a specific note. And then you might be using a sound library that treats middle C an octave up or an octave down from there. And if you are not aligning those, then you can get some unpredictable results. And I'll kind of share with you how that might manifest itself in your workflow, and then hopefully help you troubleshoot that, okay? So let's go to my desktop here, and I'm going to show you what I've got here. So I've got just this very basic little passage on rototoms, and if I play it back, we get that little drum pattern, right? Now, if I look at this in my key editor, this is really cool. You can see down here that I have, for my rototom, I sort of have these sub MIDI lines, right? For left hand, right hand. I put in flam and drag. You'll have to forgive the fact that this says snare, because I set these up for a snare when I was setting up a drum earlier, and it applied here, but I didn't have time to rename them. Anyway, I think you'll forgive me on that. But let's look at just a simple left hand, right hand. I actually have in this library a sample for left hand hit and a sample for right hand hit This sample here is for forte piano, and then we have this, which is kind of like a long drag, or it's like quad. It's 4 hits. And you can see over here in my instrument, so this is running rototoms out of Berlin Percussion, and I've loaded up the 6, the 8, the 10, the 12, and the 14. So these are going to be my 5 rototoms. And they're grouped into single hits, rolls, and dynamics. And you can see down here the white keys are the ones that are being used. They're assigned. So these are your key switches, right? But there's 2 key switches here. There's a key switch down here in yellow, which is choosing between single notes, rolls, and dynamics. And we'll see how in percussion maps you need to keep track of that, as well as the notes that hit the actual samples. So you have 2 kinds of key switches when you want to hit a single hit. Let's say you want to hit left hand, then you want to have the C note, but you also want to have this key switch down here that makes sure that you're playing on single hits. Because if you try and play this note here when you're on rolls, there's no sample there, so it won't play back, right? So that is an overview of how this works inside a sign player. Let's start by looking at kits versus instruments over here in setup. So what I've got here is a rototoms player, so I did that just by adding a player, and I actually added an instrument called rototoms that was actually in here. So if you go to look here, you see that Dorico, this is Dorico Pro 5. I imagine it's consistent in a lot of different environments. There is 5 different rototoms and then sort of a collection here. This is a kit, and these are individual instruments. Thanks, Rich, for letting me know about the echo in the voice. I think hopefully that was short-lived. I think I fixed that issue. So if it comes up again, please let me know. So I added rototoms here, and you can see that it actually shows up as a green sort of display, whereas this snare down here shows up as sort of like gray or white. The green is indicating that it is a kit. And this is important because a kit can contain many different instruments. And if we want to know what instruments it contains, we're going to right-click on it and go to Edit Percussion Kit. And we're going to see here that it contains these 5 instruments. Each of these instruments have their own sort of settings and configurations. And I've got this configured here on a 5-line staff. Okay. And each of these instruments has their own note head settings and can even have their own percussion map, but I'm not going to follow down that rabbit hole. I am going to point out though that it's important to be aware that when you're working with a kit, the kit is sort of a container that then contains individual instruments. So if I want to set up the note heads for this, I have to actually choose an instrument. I don't set up note heads for the kit, I set up note heads for pieces in the kit. And then when I do that, I get either Edit Percussion Playing Techniques here, let me zoom out, or I get this little window, Override Percussion Note Heads. We're not going to use this at this point. What we're going to just be using is this Edit Percussion Playing Techniques. And you can see that I've set up a bunch of note heads here. Now the note heads don't visually look any different, but they are assigned to individual playback techniques. So these have to exist in your playback techniques up here. So if I go into the library, let me close this out because the menu is disabled. All right, if I go into library and I go down to playback techniques, if I don't have, let's say I am looking for that quad, right? If I don't have this set up as a playback technique, then I can never add a note head for it. And if I can't add a note head for it, then I can never get this nice little display down towards the bottom of my right where I can see these options. These are essentially displaying for me all of the note heads that I have set up, okay? So you have to go through a little bit of a logical understanding that the kit contains pieces, and each piece then has playing techniques. And the way to organize those playing techniques is with note heads. The note heads, it's not important that the note heads look physically different. You will get this little message here. The appearance for this is not unique, and that's okay. Because as you'll see, I don't need to have these be different note heads visually in order for them to trigger different samples. Okay, and I've even got a natural over here, and I've got the 3 strokes on it, which will make it play tremolo. Okay, so that's where you set up tremolo. All right, so hopefully at this point you understand the idea of setting up a kit versus an instrument and how you put instruments inside the kit. But still, for each instrument, you need to set up note heads. And the note heads are going to be the thing that allows you to differentiate in your music which trigger, which sample you want to trigger. So how is that done? How do I actually change this? Well, down here in my example, if I select a note and I hold down Option and Shift, you'll see that it's just like I'm doing semitone transposition of notes. As I'm going up and down, instead of it moving on the staff, it's moving through the different articulations, if you will. And if you look down here, as I'm moving through them, it's actually moving through this visual display, which is really nice and helpful. So you can really see what it is that you're doing, right? So the instrument, the high rototom, is on this line. It's on the F line in the staff. It's always going to stay there, but within that line, there are many different note heads. Even though all the note heads look visually the same, inside of Cubase down here, they are registering as unique playback techniques. So I hope at this point that it's making more sense where the percussion kit is really a crucial part of being able to organize your different samples and make them visually apparent to you while you're composing. All right. So the next step is to look at how do we get these triggered, okay? All right, thanks, Rich. I will probably just look at the playback and see if I can solve that. And if anybody has questions, while we're on this, please let me know. So now we want to get, we've got the note head set up, and we're able to sort of put that into our composition, know which sample we're triggering, but now we want to actually trigger it. And for that, we need a percussion map. Okay, so we're going to go into the play menu, or play mode, select the rototoms, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this. You go up to percussion map, and I made this percussion map called rototoms, and I'll share that with you, what that looks like. Okay, so I've got 4 notes here. If you don't know how to reach these, you want to make sure down here in your percussion map you hit show all. Now this can be kind of daunting, which is I think why they have 2 options, just show MIDI notes in use and show all. So you want to sort of look at these columns, and you want to identify these values kind of ahead of time. So I'm sorry, I realize that you're not seeing the screen for me. So I've got my percussion map here loaded up. I'll just go back and make sure that you're kind of clear. So this is in play mode. Up here in percussion map, I've got this rototom set up. I open it up, and this is what I get. Okay. Now the way that I set these up is that C3 is the note name that actually is the white key over here in Sign Player. That's the note name, and I just have to find that. I don't enter it. I just have to find it in this long list, and then I have to select it, and then I have to fill in these values down here. Now the name is arbitrary. I could call this, Music Chef. I could call it whatever I want. Doesn't matter. It has no impact on the functionality. It's just there for you to reference visually. And so I just put left hand hit, right hand hit, right? Instrument is crucial because this is what's going to tie this percussion map into working specifically on my rototoms. So you have to make sure that you've selected rototoms there, okay? And you can see I've actually set this on a per instrument basis, so I'm sorry, let me clarify. It's set on Rototom's high, which is one of the 5 instruments in my Rototom's percussion kit. So you have to set these up on a per kit basis. And let's say that you wanted to, let's just sort of jump forward a little bit and say, what if you want this same hit, as you will, on your Rototom low? Okay, it's going to be the same pitch, and it's going to be the same key switch. This key switch 24, frustratingly, is a number that basically correlates to this up here, 24, so C1. C1 is the yellow key, and it's determining that I want single hits or rolls or dynamics. So let's just keep looking at these examples. Frustratingly, this is, you have to know the number, 24, which is kind of goofy. But you can always use this as a reference and look it up, whatever you need there, right? So C3 and 48, these are just there statically. I have to find the one I need. This is a value, can be whatever I want it. I have to choose the instrument that is in my kit and make sure it's registered there correctly. This would be the yellow key in my sine player, the bass switch. And then this is the actual playback technique that is in my library here under playback techniques, okay, right here. It's got to be in there before you can set a note head, but it's also got to be in there before you can set it up in your expression map. All right, so I've got these set up, and what I would recommend really is that you actually kind of maybe make a spreadsheet and map these out. MIDI note, note name, name, instrument, key switch, playback technique. Like get your ducks in a row before you do this, because there's, especially if you're new to this, it can be really error prone. It can be super, super frustrating. It's just a lot easier if you're pretty sure that the data you're dealing with, you know, you kind of put it together when you had your head squarely on your shoulders. Because once you get into this whole creating percussion maps, you know, things can get a little wonky, I have to admit. And now that I've done it many times, it's more intuitive. I think it's a very flexible system, but with a lot of flexibility, you know, come other problems. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what happens if I need an expression map. For example, if you were watching earlier in the video, I had set up a tremolo on the natural note head so that I could just put tremolo slashes on the note and then have that play back as tremolo. But it's quite common that what I actually want is sort of a crescendoing tremolo. Now, this particular library happens to have sampled crescendos and decrescendos and that sort of thing, but sometimes I want to manage that with dynamics and sort of hairpins and things in my score. So I don't necessarily want to just use the crescendo and decrescendo samples. I just want to have the roll play, but I want to sort of modulate its level or its dynamic using traditional dynamics in the score. In which case, it's very important that I have an expression map set up for how I'm going to handle that dynamic. So let's say on your mod wheel for dynamics, as you're playing the tom roll, you move your CC1, your mod wheel, to make that louder or quieter, right, and get increase or decrease the dynamics. You need an expression map to handle that. Percussion maps can't do that. But if you create a percussion map like I have here, let me find the one that I have. Let's say that I go ahead and I use this percussion map here, which uses note velocity and secondarily CC11. But notice how the middle CC note is set to C3, okay? So now both of these expression maps, if I choose them here, both this expression map and the percussion map are going to have an impact on my note playback. The expression map is going to influence what happens when I click on the note in the write mode, and the rototoms are going to determine what happens on playback. So watch this, it's really weird. Now, if I click on this, you'll notice that I'm not getting any kind of note out of it. But if I play it back, I get notes. So actually, I think you are hearing that. So watch this. It's really weird. Now, if I click on this, you'll notice that I'm not getting... No, you're not. Sorry, I have to follow a little bit of a visual meter here. This can happen when there's a disconnect between this instrument's idea of middle C and Dorico's idea of middle C. So just be aware that if you have an expression map and a percussion map set up, you want to make sure that the expression map's middle C is in sync with your percussion map. The percussion map doesn't have a C3, C4 setting, but you just want to make sure this is in sync with your instrument. That way, whether or not you are clicking on the note in here in the right mode, or whether you are playing back, you're going to get the proper playback. So a quick summary of my expression map here. I'm going to go ahead and set the expression map to 0 and go into the rototoms again and just look at the ones that I set up. So I set up a left hand hit, right hand hit, the forte, piano, and the quad. Those are tied to playback techniques, which a couple of them existed, a couple of them I made. And then I had to set up the note heads back in the setup mode here. You click on these three little dots and go to Edit Percussion Kit. Then you select the individual instrument and you make sure you have the note heads. And when you add a note head, you have the option of choosing the playback technique. So if I go and choose backstick, I'm going to get a note head for backstick, okay? And then you'll see that over here in the right mode down in the key editor, suddenly I have an option for backstick. And if I go ahead and add backstick to my percussion map, then it would actually trigger a real sound, okay? So I hope that that has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, and yeah, I will just kind of briefly look here. Yeah, if you are trying this on samples, it should be fine. Sorry, cymbals. Any instrument like this where you've got multiple hits, you've got multiple keys in the percussion instrument that are, you know, designated to unique samples, maybe with different kinds of mallets, for example. You might have even a marimba or something like that, and it's with felt mallets or normal mallets or different kinds of mallets. You can also use this technique there where you can use your percussion map to manage multiples. And actually that raises an important question, which is, what do you do when I kind of pointed to this but didn't get to it earlier. What do you do if your rototom is set up correctly for your 6-inch rototom, but you want your 8-inch to hit on that same note, but you want to have control over it? Let me show you how you do that. So you're going to go into your percussion map, and you're going to select the one that you want. So for example, I want my left hit. Fortunately, I know that the left hit is exactly the same key switch combinations for every one of the rototoms. But I can go down here and I can say add key switch alternative. And now I get another C3. It's for the same instrument, but I can change that. You see, when that's highlighted, you see the values down here. And I can go ahead now and I can say I want rototom medium high. So now this is going to, sorry, I haven't updated it yet, so it's not showing there, but it's showing down here. So let me go ahead, rototom medium high, like that, so it's selected down here. I guess that's weird that that's the kind of thing that I know drives everybody crazy and drives me crazy too. That I don't know why that switched back. Let's see if I can change it very quickly there before it switched back. All right, so now I've got a left hit copy on the rototom medium. I still want the key switch to be 24. It's going to be exactly the same, because you'll see over here, whether I look at the single hits for rototom 6 or 8, it's the same keys. So it's one of the nice things about using consistency in a single library. So I'm going to want that to be 24, and I'll just take that copy off there, hit apply. So now I have the same exact mapping basically. It's just that this is going to be unique to the Rototom medium. So if I go back here to my write mode, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to go ahead and, well, let me just do this instead. I'll take this example here, which currently is set on Rototom 1 quad, and I'm going to use my option key. I'm holding down the option key on my keyboard right now. This is also like transpose. If you use option up and down arrow, it transposes the note. But if you use shift option, it transposes it by half steps. So if I go here to Rototom 2, which is my medium high, now under medium high, you see I don't have an option actually to play it. It will play it. But I don't have this same set of note heads right here, so I'd have to go back over here into Rototoms. It's probably good for me to demonstrate this. Click on the little 3 little dots, go to Edit Percussion Kit, choosing my medium high now, going here, generally I'll delete that. I'm going to add, what was it, left hand. I'm going to go ahead and delete the natural for now. So I've got a left hand there. I hit OK. That's just for the medium high. Hit close. And now I'll notice that back in here, the default is left hand. If I had more than one, I would get all these sort of sub tracks, I guess. But now, this note here is tracking through the left hand playing technique on this particular drum, so it's not going to trigger the sample for the high rototom. It's going to trigger the sample for the high medium rototom, and it's going to be handled, the triggering is going to be handled over here, even though all the values are the same, but this one's going to be handled by rototom medium. So I guess actually I set that to medium, not medium high. So to complete my example, I would actually need to put that on medium high. I think it's a little frustrating that these names aren't the same. You know, I'd like it if it said Rototom high. I can do that. Back here, I can go into the Edit Percussion Kit and go in here, and I can change this to Rototom, let's say 6-inch, like that. And then I'll just put a little 6-inch on the short name as well. And now when I go back to write mode, you can see that that's been changed to Rototom 6-inch. So it's easier this way to be able to figure out, well, what note head and sample am I going to trigger? Which drum is it assigned to? And then essentially all of these note heads need to have a value for each one of the rototoms in your percussion map over here. So it acts sort of almost like a library. You should have one for one. Whatever was in your key editor on the write mode should be over here as well. All right, well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Yes, hey, Shubhas, you actually are here for the live stream. I'm hopeful, particularly for your benefit, that this has been helpful. But I think this is a great example of how percussion maps and expression maps do and don't work together. Some of the trickier elements of combining note heads, which don't have really any place with a traditional expression map on a tonal instrument like a violin, for example. Understanding when and how to use the note heads, understanding when and how to use instruments versus kits, understanding how to get those kits to display. And actually, gosh, as I go, I keep coming up with things and I remember, oh my gosh, this was something that totally hung me up. So let me point this out as well. What happens, how do you get your rototoms to display on a five line staff, right? You might go in here and you might be on the 5-line staff and you got everything configured and you're like, great, that looks great to me, but it doesn't display. Instead, you get this kind of thing where you got a bunch of single staffs. What you have to do is you have to go into, I believe, and let me look this up because I made a note. It's layout options. All right, you have to go into layout options and you have to go into players on the left here. And then you have to go to percussion. And for each instrument, percussion instrument that has a kit, in your project, you'll find an entry here, and you have to choose here. So it's something that's done in the layout options, whether or not. See, if I choose grid here, and I go ahead and hit apply, you can see how it changed it down here to a grid view. So this is yet another step in the process for making sure that everything is configured correctly. Are you using a kit? You want to make sure that you've set up your note heads. I highly recommend making out that table of what's the note, what's the hit type, the name, what's the key switch that governs it, what's the instrument it pertains to, is it rototom high, medium, so on and so forth, as well as what is the playback technique. Because if you can fill out kind of a spreadsheet, it could just be scribbled on a piece of paper, but if you do that ahead of time, it'll make the process of setting up your percussion map a lot easier. So that is it. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think that whether or not this pertains to you and you need to work with rototoms, you're going to come up with a percussion piece that you're going to want to use from sophisticated libraries these days. If you're doing serious production, these libraries are very sophisticated, and you need to know how percussion sets work, how kits work, how note heads work, the differences between percussion maps, and so on and so forth. I've said it all. Anyway, I'm thrilled that this live stream worked. Absolutely thrilled. I tell you, I just love doing these live streams. I love connecting with people who care about this stuff too. But it takes a lot of time, and I really needed to take some steps to make it all a lot more manageable and a lot easier on my schedule. And that's what I think I've achieved. So thank you very much, everybody, for supporting my channel up until now. I'm looking forward to kind of having newer, better streams from now on. And I look forward to any questions that anybody has about percussion maps, how I set this all up. Please let me know. And yeah, like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. I'll see you guys later. All right, take care. Bye.